Imagine you're a little kid in 2008. You're supposed to be in bed, but instead you snuck out to watch TV. And while you're scrolling through the channels, this show comes on.
Together. Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's jam.
And then you change the channel. Yeah, that was me. And you really can't blame me. I was only like 11 or 12. I didn't really know what I was stumbling upon when Cowboy Bebop first came across my TV. All I saw was this guy who was smoking cigarettes and doing bad things with his friends. And I was like, what is this? What kind of anime is this? I want to see some Dragon Ball Z, some Naruto, some Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Yu Yu Hakusho. I didn't really care about smoking cigarettes and doing bad things with my friends. But I realized I made a grave error. So I took some time to rectify this mistake. And now I'm here to share with you my first impressions from my first time watching Cowboy Bebop.
3, 2, 1, let's jam.
But before we continue, make sure you hit subscribe. And also you can support me on my Patreon if you want to see more of these videos coming out. It only takes $1 a month to support this struggling YouTuber. Now, if you don't know, Cowboy Bebop is a show about a crew of bounty hunters, space bounty hunters to be in fact, who go around the galaxy looking for bounties basically so they can get money. And the crew consists of the one and only Spike Spiegel, Faye Valentine, Jet Black, Ed, and Ein. And this crew of space bounty hunters come together through various situations, but they all end up on the same ship. And the show goes through different encounters they have with different bounties that they're pursuing. But at the same time, the story gives us the backstory of these characters that we're watching. And while all this sounds really cool, you know, space cowboys looking for bounties, collecting money, getting that bank, making that paper, all this sounds really cool. But what threw me off was that the structure of Cowboy Bebop is episodic instead of serialization. This whole time I thought Cowboy Bebop was going to be solely and completely about the characters on the spaceship on Bebop. I initially thought it would follow Spike, who was our main character, and him meeting Vicious again and them fighting again, which in a way the show does do that, but it doesn't directly follow these characters' personal stories. It has their personal stories interwoven throughout episodes throughout the show. And while these episodes on the characters' backstories are loosely connected, this was honestly such a disappointment for me when watching this show. And it's not a disappointment because the standalone episodes were such a bad thing. They were honestly good, and the themes that they explored in the standalone episodes were honestly really good and interesting. Like, if you didn't cry at this, I don't know how you could be human. But it was so disappointing for me to not see the show be dedicated to these characters' personal stories. It's something that I honestly wanted more of. I wanted to learn more about, you know, Jet's past as a police officer. I wanted to know about Spike's past as a soldier. I feel like we got so much of Spike that it feels like we got so little time to spend with him and get to actually know him. And I wanted to know more about Faye's past, but also I wanted to know more about Faye's future. Since she's somebody who has lost her memory, I think it would only be right for us to experience what her future would be like. And Ed, I always thought that they would explore her parentage a little more. We got some information on who her parents are, but you know, towards the end of the show, she kind of just walks off, find her parents, which I don't know how I feel about that, honestly. And so yeah, I only dislike this episodic nature to the show because my favorite episodes from the show were the ones that focus on the past of the Bebop crew. That's what I wanted more of. And speaking of the past, this show, even though this show is set in the future, it focuses a lot on the past of the characters, the history of the world, even the setting that this show is in looks like it came right out of the 90s, except everything can fly and doesn't have wheels. Granted, it was written in the 90s, but you can't tell me that this isn't my aunt's Toyota Corolla. Also interesting how, even though we're in this future resembling the past, many of the settings in the show don't look better than how things are today. You know, usually when people think of the future, it's some utopia that's friendly and peaceful and everybody sort of kind of gets along, but that is not how things seem in Cowboy Bebop. It seems as if there is struggle and strife to every planet that the Bebop crew goes to. And even the buildings and infrastructure of some of these planets just looks decimated. When we see Earth, our home planet, for the first time in Cowboy Bebop, that thing has been destroyed on the surface. It's almost as if this dreary letdown of a future is trying to warn us of what our future could look like, with how much they reference the events of the past in this show and the effects that those events had on the future. But they put so much emphasis on the past in this show, it's no surprise that my favorite episodes were the ones on the characters' past, especially when they were talking about Spike and Faye. No disrespect to Jet and Ed though, they're some real badasses. But the episodes about Spike and Faye's backstories, they hit so much harder because at the surface, you would assume Spike is just a cool, suave, loose cannon that doesn't really play by anybody else's rules except for his own, until you find out his backstory and who he used to be in his other lives. You find out he was a soldier in a war and he had other comrades before the Bebop crew. And these comrades tried to take him out. The people that he used to work for tried to take him out. And so now we see that he's living life as if he's walking towards death. And he's ready to face death no matter what. Which is somewhat brave, but also really eerie that this person doesn't want to be able to preserve their own life. And then there's Faye. Out of all the characters of the Bebop crew, had my favorite backstory. Because like Spike, when we meet her, she appears as a simple character, a two-dimensional character, a woman with large amounts of debt that's always after money and seems to be constantly drinking and smoking all the time. Now, while this seems pretty standard for a show with an episodic format, each time Faye gets an episode centered on her backstory, where she was once a 2D character, she now becomes more nuanced because these episodes fill in the holes to her character and it answers questions for why she acts the way that she does. We learn that she's in debt, first of all, because of an operation that saved her life. And that is also why she's always after money, because she is constantly trying to get enough money to pay off all of these debts. And her constant drinking could be a response to drown out the troubles of her past and a way to comfort her worries of a life that she doesn't remember. You know, the characters becoming more fleshed out and developed was honestly one of my favorite parts of the show, because with each character-centered episode, they become more nuanced and real. But what's better is that these characters always had each other to lean on, even though they act like they weren't going to be there for each other. Cowboy Bebop sets up Spike, Jet, Faye, Ed, and Ein to be a dysfunctional family that acts like they don't care for one another, but when it really comes down to it, they always appear for each other in the last moments, ready to save their friends. But the show also lets each individual character handle important character moments on their own, like letting Jet face his old partner, or letting Faye search for her family in the past that she cannot remember, and finally letting Spike face Vicious. I also feel like the show did a great job on giving us these characters' backstories, but then at the same time not leaving any of these characters' arcs unfinished. You know, Jet is able to come to terms with losing his arm after finding out the truth about his partner betraying him, and he's able to put that part of his life behind him and move towards the future after he shoots his partner in the head. And after Faye searches for her family and anything remaining from her past, she finally comes to terms with the fact that Bebop is not her home after she rediscovers the remains of her childhood home. And Spike, a man who has been ready for death and has been struggling with the past, never being able to let it go, he's willing to actually face his past now. All of these moments were essential to completing the character story arcs, and the show did a great job of making sure the characters came to these realizations in a natural way by themselves with the actions that they would actually make. When I first started the show, I honestly expected to like it because of how revered it is in the anime community. It honestly lives up to the hype. I didn't expect it to have such themes centered around somebody's past, death, finding your family, and a myriad of themes explored in the other standalone episodes. Sadly, to me, it didn't fully focus on my favorite aspect of the show, which was the characters. And this is my only complaint with the show, because who wouldn't want to know more about Spike's past, or Jet's time as a police officer, or Faye's future, or if Ed ever actually finds her dad, and even Ein. What happens to that little guy? I mean, I want to know. I feel like we only got a short amount of time with these characters, but it's not even a bad complaint when a viewer wants more of a certain aspect from your show. That's how you know you did that part of the show well. But I'll gladly have a love-hate relationship with the episodic structure if it means I can hang out with the Bebop crew once again. If you like this video, you'll probably like my other review on Violet Evergarden, and it focuses on the themes of love in that show. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button to let me know that you like these videos. And you can also support me on my Patreon if you want to see more of these videos. So thank you, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.